Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ironworker Gaming Channel. I am Ironworker814 and thank you for joining me for another Destiny 2 PvP 5-minute exotic armor review. And if you're wondering why my Warlock is dressed up like a Titan, it's because we are taking a look at the Synthoceps Exotic Gauntlets. Don't forget to press that thumbs up button to show this video some support, and if it's your first time to the channel, consider subscribing to help us on our way to 1,000 subscribers. And if you've caught some of my previous weapon or armor reviews, you probably know that I really like diving deep into things and figuring out how they work and showing actual numbers for the Crucible. And it was brought to my attention by channel supporters Basm and Cyber that there was a lack of solid information floating around about the Synthoceps. And after looking into it for myself, I found that with a few exceptions, a lot of these Synthoceps review videos were basically Let's Play with people walking around punching people saying, "Oh, these gloves are so good," without actually explaining how they worked. And while I am by no means an expert on all things Titan, through some moderate testing I was able to gather a good bit of information on how Synthoceps work and what they are capable of. So let's hop into it and see what these Synthoceps gauntlets can do for us in the Crucible. Alright, Synthoceps have been around in Destiny 2 since the launch of the game. They are a random world drop or can be purchased from Xur. These gloves are all about getting in tight and punching things, which is the Titan way. We can see this through the exotic perk Biotic Enhancements, where we are gaining increased melee lunge range and improved melee and super damage when surrounded. So we'll start off by checking how much melee range we're actually gaining, and I was using Middle Tree Sunbreaker to test this. First off, I established the base melee range to be 5 meters without Synthoceps. We can see when the hammer is thrown here at 5.5 meters that we are out of that melee range. With Synthoceps equipped, you can see that our melee range is at 7 meters. But when stepping back to 8 meters, we are out of that base melee range. So essentially we are gaining 2 meters of melee lunge range with Synthoceps. But how about the surrounded side of the Biotic Enhancement perk? First off, you'll need 3 enemies in proximity to get this perk to proc. I feel like this used to be 2, but alas, it is 3. And shockingly, we see this perk proc when we are 14 meters away from a tightly grouped mob of enemy guardians. And once applied, this buff remains active for 8 seconds after leaving the vicinity of the enemies. So that's a nice window to do some damage. And speaking of damage, a cut and dry base melee is going to do 113 points of damage to your target. With Biotic Enhancements procced, our base melee damage jumps up to 185, roughly a 63% damage increase. And since Synthoceps are not subclass specific, we tried these out with several different charged melees. I'm not going to show you every bit of testing that we did because I'm trying to keep this video around 5 minutes, but Ballistic Slam has a base damage of 130 points of damage that jumps up to 241 points of damage with the Biotic Enhancement active. As you can see, the perk procs just before we make contact, and that is actually an 87% damage increase. When running Juggernaut with Knockout active also, we are seeing this melee hit for 296 points of damage. And then Tactical Strike on Code of the Commander, we saw 130 plus 56, and I think the blast damage was not calculated correctly because this was a one-hit kill on Smelly Drifter who was not running 0 resilience. And for our solar subclasses, we have this little Solar Plexus gem in the seasonal artifact this time around for increased solar melee damage, which on its own nets us a total of 167 points of impact and burn damage with the Mortar Blast melee. But with Solar Plexus and Biotic Enhancements, we down all 3 targets outright, doing 209 points of damage to each one of them. And then when using the Throwing Hammer, we see we hit for 280 points of damage. Now I did not check the increased super damage on enemies in PvP, just because it's not terribly applicable. But the main takeaway here is that Biotic Enhancement does make your melee exponentially more powerful, and they are usable at increased ranges. Alright, first off, that increased melee range is noticeable, and that is something I very much appreciate. And needless to say, if you're going to be running Synthoceps, you might as well go all in on a melee build. I mean, spec hard into your strength stat, run some melee mods, use Monte Carlo, basically just do anything to ensure that your charged melee is up as often as possible. And while you don't need to do so, I would let whatever elemental melee damage mod that is in the seasonal artifact determine your subclass, since it is really hard to argue against extra damage. But like I said, that's just a suggestion from a non-Titan, so feel free to play as you please. One thing I did not test while I had the posse all rounded up was damage versus supers. but just doing the math, we can see that certain skill trees can double melee supers if bionic enhancements are active. And one drawback that I need to mention is the fact that I was having a tough time actually getting surrounded and getting this perk to activate in PvP. This is not a problem you're going to see in PvE or Gambit, since you can basically ensure that you are surrounded at all times. But I feel like currently in the Crucible, Guardians just aren't grouping up as much as they did in days past. So I spent a lot of my time while live testing just running around the Crucible maps like an idiot trying to get biotic enhancements to proc, which made for a whole heap of not so good gameplay footage. But this just could be a me problem, because like I said earlier, I do not know all the fine nuances of the Titan subclasses. And to be quite honest, my movement as a Titan is pretty garbage. So if you are a Titan main, I hope you give Synthoceps a try and see how you think they're stacking up here in Season of Arrivals. And if you do give them a try, definitely stop back and drop your experiences and any tips you may have in the comments so that other Guardians can make use of them. And if you've made it to this point in the video and just downright forgot to hit that like button, now's your chance. And to see more Destiny 2 reviews, guides, and discussions very similar to this one, consider subscribing to the Ironworker Gaming channel. If you want to catch me live, you can drop Ironworker814 a follow on Twitch and you will get notified whenever I hop on. And to get a hold of me, simply leave a comment down below and I will be sure to get back to you. And with all that being said, I'd like to sincerely thank you for spending a piece of your day checking out this video. You guys are awesome and I will catch you on the next one.